The old guard had established the boundaries of the world, but Olympus was not meant to be empty. It was meant to be a dynasty. And like all dynasties, the real danger didn't come from the enemies outside the walls. It came from the family inside. Zeus, now secure on his throne, began to father a new generation of gods. But the birth of his favorite child, Athena, began, as all things with Zeus do, with a prophecy and an act of paranoia. His first wife was not Hera, but Metis, the Titaness of wisdom. It was Metis who had helped Zeus poison Cronus. She was brilliant, cunning, and dangerous. Gaia warned Zeus that if Metis bore him a son, that son would be stronger than his father and would overthrow him, just as Zeus had overthrown Cronus. The cycle of violence threatened to repeat. Zeus, terrified of losing his power, did the unthinkable. He didn't swallow the child, he swallowed the mother. He tricked Metis into turning into a drop of water and drank her whole. He thought the problem was solved. He was wrong. Months later, Zeus was struck by a headache so agonizing that his screams shook the firmament. It felt as if his skull was being split open from the inside. Desperate, he ordered Hephaestus to crack his head open with an axe. The moment the axe struck, a miracle occurred. From the open wound of Zeus's head sprang a woman. She was fully grown, she was fully armored in gleaming gold, and she was shouting a war cry that echoed across the earth. This was Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategic war. Because she had no mother, born solely from the king himself, she was the only god Zeus truly trusted. She carried his shield, the Aegis. She wielded his thunderbolt. But unlike her brother Ares, who we will meet soon, Athena did not love blood. She loved victory. She was the mistress of strategy, the patron of generals who win battles before the first arrow is fired. She represented the intellectual side of war, discipline, formation, and glorious tactical genius. She sat at Zeus's right hand, the voice of reason in a chaotic court. If Athena was the mind of Olympus, the twins, Apollo and Artemis, were its soul. Their mother was Leto, a gentle Titaness. But gentleness is no defense against the wrath of Hera. When Hera discovered Leto was pregnant with Zeus's children, she cursed the very earth. She decreed that no land that saw the light of the sun could offer Leto a place to give birth. Leto wandered the world in agony, rejected by every country, every island, afraid of the queen's wrath. Finally, she found Delos, a barren, floating rock that was technically not land attached to the ocean floor. Here, clinging to a palm tree, she gave birth. First came Artemis, the moon, the huntress. Moments later, acting as a midwife to her own mother, Artemis helped deliver her twin brother, Apollo, the sun, the golden boy. Apollo became the ideal of Greek manhood. He was the god of music, playing a golden lyre that charmed the souls of men. He was the god of prophecy, speaking through the famous oracle at Delphi. He was the god of healing, and yet he was also the god of plagues. His arrows could cure a sickness or wipe out an army with disease. He was beautiful, brilliant, and terrifyingly distant. Artemis was his opposite. She looked at the political games of Olympus and turned her back on them. She demanded a gift from Zeus, eternal virginity and the freedom to roam the wild forests. She became the lady of the beasts. She protected young women and wild animals, but her justice was savage. There is a story of a hunter named Actanion who, by accident, stumbled upon Artemis while she was bathing in a stream. He saw the goddess naked. For this crime, Artemis didn't shout. She simply splashed water on him. Instantly, Actanion transformed. Antlers burst from his skull. His skin turned to fur. He became a stag. Unable to speak, he fled into the woods, only to be torn apart by his own hunting dogs. The lesson was clear. The beauty of the gods is not for mortal eyes. But not all of Zeus's children were perfect. And the most dysfunctional triangle in mythology involves a cripple, a butcher, and a beauty queen. Hera, jealous that Zeus had birthed Athena on his own, decided to birth a child by herself to prove she didn't need him. The result was Hephaestus. But he was not a golden warrior. He was shriveled, ugly, and lame. Hera, the goddess of perfection, was so disgusted that she threw her own infant son off the edge of Mount Olympus. He fell for a day and a night, crashing into the ocean. He survived, but he was broken forever. Hephaestus grew up in exile, becoming a master smith. He channeled his pain into creation. He forged automatons of gold, weapons of mass destruction, and jewelry of impossible intricacy. And he forged a plan for revenge. He built a magnificent golden throne and sent it as a gift to his mother, Hera. Delighted, the queen sat upon it. Instantly, invisible chains lashed out, binding her to the chair. No god could break them. Hephaestus had captured the Queen of Heaven. He refused to release her until he was given a seat on the Olympian council and a wife, the most beautiful wife. He demanded Aphrodite. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, born from the sea foam, was desire incarnate. She was married to Hephaestus, the ugly, soot-covered smith. It was a union doomed from the start. Aphrodite looked for comfort elsewhere. She found it in the arms of Ares. Ares was the god of war. But unlike Athena, he was not a strategist. He was a butcher. He represented the bloodlust, the madness of the slaughter, the screams of the dying. Even Zeus hated him, calling him a double-faced liar. But Aphrodite loved him. They were opposites that attracted: love and war, passion and violence. Their affair was the worst-kept secret on Olympus until Helios, the sun, saw them together in Hephaestus's bed and whispered the truth to the smith. Hephaestus didn't rage. He went to his forge. He spun a net of bronze, so fine it was invisible like a spiderweb, but stronger than adamant. He rigged it above his marriage bed. The next time Ares and Aphrodite lay together, the trap sprang. The net fell, pinning the two naked lovers together, unable to move. Hephaestus threw open the doors of his bedroom and invited all the gods of Olympus to come and watch. He humiliated them. The gods gathered, looking at the trapped lovers. Poseidon looked away in embarrassment, but Hermes and Apollo laughed, joking that they wouldn't mind being trapped in a net if it meant lying with Aphrodite. It was a divine comedy, but it revealed a truth. On Olympus, power, lust, and humiliation were the currency of the realm.
The 12 Olympians sat on their golden thrones, believing the war was over. They believed that by defeating the Titans, they had tamed the universe. They drank their nectar, played their petty political games, and looked down on the world as their property. But they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten the source of their power. They had forgotten their grandmother. Gaia, the earth itself. Gaia was not evil, but she was a mother, and she had watched Zeus, her grandson, do exactly what his father Cronus had done: imprison her children. The Titans were rotting in Tartarus, screaming in the dark. The Cyclopes were slaves to the forge. Gaia's patience broke. She did not scream, she rumbled. Deep beneath the tectonic plates, she began to brew a new terror. She did not mate with a god to create this army. She mated with the blood of Uranus that had spilled upon her eons ago. From the earth, she birthed the Gigantes, the giants. These were not like the Titans, who were beautiful and noble. The giants were monstrosities of nature. They were hairy, wild, with burning eyes. Their legs were not human legs, but coiled serpents that hissed as they walked. They were as tall as mountains, and their strength was limitless. But Gaia gave them one specific gift, a failsafe against the Olympians. She made them immune to the power of gods. No lightning bolt, no trident, no divine arrow could kill a giant. They could only be killed if a god and a mortal worked together. It was a prophecy designed to humiliate Zeus. To win, the king of the universe would have to beg for help from a human. Chapter 12. The Gigantomachy, the War of Giants. The attack began not with a declaration of war, but with a bombardment. The giants ripped entire peaks off the mountain ranges of Thessaly and hurled them at Olympus. Flaming oak trees rained down like spears. The sky turned black. The Olympians, for the first time since the Titan War, felt fear. Zeus rallied his family. This was not a battle for territory, it was a battle for survival. Ares donned his armor, Athena grabbed her shield, Apollo strung his bow. Even the Fates joined the fray, wielding clubs of bronze. But the prophecy held true. Zeus struck the giant Porphyrion with a thunderbolt, burning him to a crisp, but the giant simply stood up again, healing instantly as long as he touched his mother, the earth. The gods were losing. In desperation, Zeus sent Athena to find the mortal savior. In some myths, this is Heracles, the son of Zeus, brought to the battlefield before his time to fulfill destiny. The battle turned into a slaughterhouse. Alcyoneus, the greatest of the giants, was immortal as long as he fought in his homeland. Heracles, realizing this, didn't try to kill him. He grabbed the massive giant and dragged him across the border, into a foreign land. Once Alcyoneus lost contact with his home soil, Heracles crushed him with a single blow. The gods saw the strategy. They unleashed their full fury. Poseidon chased the giant Polybotes across the sea. When the giant tried to flee, Poseidon didn't just strike him, he stabbed his trident into the island of Kos, ripped off a massive chunk of land, and dropped the entire island on top of the giant, burying him forever beneath the waves. Athena faced Enceladus. She didn't use a weapon, she lifted the island of Sicily and slammed it down upon him. To this day, Enceladus lies trapped beneath Mount Etna, his angry breath fueling the volcano's fire. Hermes, wearing the helmet of invisibility, assassinated Hippolytus. Artemis shot Gratian. Hecate torched Clytius with infernal torches. One by one, the sons of Gaia fell. The serpents that served as their legs were crushed. The rebellion was quelled. The Gigantomachy ended with the absolute victory of Olympus.
So there they sat, the 12 Olympians. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Demeter, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, Hephaestus, Aphrodite, Hermes, and Dionysus, with Hades ruling below and Hestia tending the fire. They feasted on ambrosia. They interfered in the wars of men. They loved, they hated, they plotted. It seemed that their reign was unshakable. They had defeated the Titans. They had tamed the elements. But the earth has a long memory. Gaia, the grandmother of the gods, was still awake. She had watched her Titan children fall. She had watched the giants fall. And now, seeing the arrogance of these new gods, she prepared one final test, a test that would threaten to tear Mount Olympus from the sky. The era of stability was ending. The era of the gigantacamy, the war of the giants, was about to begin. And this time, the gods would learn a humbling lesson. They could not win without the help of a mortal.
The 12 Olympians sat on their golden thrones, believing the war was over. They believed that by defeating the Titans, they had tamed the universe. They drank their nectar, played their petty political games, and looked down on the world as their property. But they had forgotten one thing. They had forgotten the source of their power. They had forgotten their grandmother, Gaia, the earth itself. Gaia was not evil, but she was a mother, and she had watched Zeus, her grandson, do exactly what his father Cronus had done, imprison her children. The Titans were rotting in Tartarus, screaming in the dark. The Cyclopes were slaves to the forge. Gaia's patience broke. She did not scream, she rumbled. Deep beneath the tectonic plates, she began to brew a new terror. She did not mate with a god to create this army. She mated with the blood of Uranus that had spilled upon her eons ago. From the earth, she birthed the Gigantes, the giants. These were not like the Titans, who were beautiful and noble. The giants were monstrosities of nature. They were hairy, wild, with burning eyes. Their legs were not human legs, but coiled serpents that hissed as they walked. They were as tall as mountains, and their strength was limitless. But Gaia gave them one specific gift, a failsafe against the Olympians. She made them immune to the power of gods. No lightning bolt, no trident, no divine arrow could kill a giant. They could only be killed if a god and a mortal worked together. It was a prophecy designed to humiliate Zeus. To win, the king of the universe would have to beg for help from a human. Chapter 12, The Gigantomachy, the War of Giants. The attack began not with a declaration of war, but with a bombardment. The giants ripped entire peaks off the mountain ranges of Thessaly and hurled them at Olympus. Flaming oak trees rained down like spears. The sky turned black. The Olympians, for the first time since the Titan War, felt fear. Zeus rallied his family. This was not a battle for territory, it was a battle for survival. Ares donned his armor, Athena grabbed her shield, Apollo strung his bow. Even the Fates joined the fray, wielding clubs of bronze. But the prophecy held true. Zeus struck the giant Porphyrion with a thunderbolt, burning him to a crisp, but the giant simply stood up again, healing instantly as long as he touched his mother, the earth. The gods were losing. In desperation, Zeus sent Athena to find the mortal savior. In some myths, this is Heracles, the son of Zeus, brought to the battlefield before his time to fulfill destiny. The battle turned into a slaughterhouse. Alcyoneus, the greatest of the giants, was immortal as long as he fought in his homeland. Heracles, realizing this, didn't try to kill him. He grabbed the massive giant and dragged him across the border into a foreign land. Once Alcyoneus lost contact with his home soil, Heracles crushed him with a single blow. The gods saw the strategy. They unleashed their full fury. Poseidon chased the giant Polybotes across the sea. When the giant tried to flee, Poseidon didn't just strike him, he stabbed his trident into the island of Kos, ripped off a massive chunk of land, and dropped the entire island on top of the giant, burying him forever beneath the waves. Athena faced Enceladus. She didn't use a weapon, she lifted the island of Sicily and slammed it down upon him. To this day, Enceladus lies trapped beneath Mount Etna, his angry breath fueling the volcano's fire. Hermes, wearing the helmet of invisibility, assassinated Hippolytus. Artemis shot Gratian. Hecate torched Clytius with infernal torches. One by one, the sons of Gaia fell. The serpents that served as their legs were crushed. The rebellion was quelled. The Gigantomachie ended with the absolute victory of Olympus.
Gaia was devastated. Her titans were imprisoned. Her giants were dead. Her rage turned into a cold, hard resolve. She realized that numbers didn't matter. Armies didn't matter. She needed a monster. One single entity so powerful that it could erase existence. She descended into the deepest pit of Tartarus and mingled with the darkness. From this unholy union, she birthed her final child, Typhon. There are no words in human language to describe Typhon. He was the father of all monsters. He was so massive, his head brushed the stars. His wings blocked out the sun, casting the world into shadow. Instead of fingers, he had 100 dragon heads, each vomiting fire and screaming in the voices of bulls, lions, and serpents. From his eyes, lava flowed like tears. He did not march on Olympus, he stormed it. The seas boiled at his approach, the earth melted beneath his feet. The Olympians, fresh from their victory against the giants, looked down at this abomination, and they broke. Panic, pure, unadulterated panic swept through the golden halls. "We cannot fight this," they whispered. "This is the end." In a moment of shameful cowardice, the gods fled. They jumped from Mount Olympus, transforming themselves into animals to hide. Apollo became a crow, Dionysus became a goat, Hera became a white cow. They ran all the way to Egypt, cowering in the desert, hiding from the monster that climbed towards their empty thrones. Only one god remained, Zeus. Perhaps it was pride. Perhaps he knew that if the king ran, the universe would dissolve back into chaos. He stood alone on the peak of Olympus, stripping off his royal robes, gripping the master bolt. "I am the king," he roared at the approaching darkness, "and I will not yield."
Typhon crested the mountain, the clash that shook the foundations of reality. Zeus unleashed a barrage of lightning so intense it turned the night sky into blinding white day. He burned the dragon heads, he scorched the wings. But Typhon was relentless. The monster hurled mountains back at Zeus. He spewed rivers of poison that dissolved the very rock of Olympus. They wrestled across the continents. Their impact carved out valleys. Their footsteps created lakes. At Mount Casius, disaster struck. Typhon managed to disarm Zeus. He wrestled the master bolt from the king's hand. Then, using a sickle of jagged adamant, the monster did something unspeakable. He cut the sinews from Zeus's hands and feet. The king of gods fell, paralyzed, helpless, a sack of immortal meat. Typhon carried the broken body of Zeus to a cave in Cilicia, intending to let him rot before devouring him. He hid the severed sinews in a bearskin and set a dragon woman, Delphine, to guard them. The universe fell silent. The bad guy had won. Darkness began to consume the world. But the age of heroes is defined by loyalty. Hermes, the trickster, and Pan, the god of the wild, crept into the cave. Pan let out a scream so terrifying, a panic, that the guard dragon froze in fear. Hermes, moving faster than thought, stole the sinews and reattached them to Zeus's body. Zeus arose, and this time he was not fighting for a throne. He was fighting for revenge. He chased Typhon across the sea to Sicily. As the monster tried to retreat, Zeus lifted the massive Mount Etna. With a roar that shook the heavens, he slammed the entire mountain down on top of Typhon. Crash! The monster was crushed, trapped beneath millions of tons of rock. He could not escape, but he could not die. To this day, he struggles to break free, his lava breath spewing from the crater, shaking the earth with his rage.
Zeus returned to Olympus, battered, scarred, but victorious. The other gods returned from Egypt, sheepish, resuming their true forms. There were no celebrations, no feasts, just the quiet realization that they had survived the impossible. The threats to their rule were gone. The Titans imprisoned, the giants dead, Typhon buried. The hierarchy was cemented. Zeus was not just a king by lot, he was king by might. He had faced the end of the world alone and won. The age of cosmic war was over. The structure of the universe was final. Zeus looked down from his unassailable fortress. He saw the oceans ruled by Poseidon. He saw the underworld ruled by Hades. He saw the forests, the skies, the beasts. But he saw a world that was empty. It was beautiful, yes, but it was silent. There was no one to worship them, no one to build temples, no one to fear them, no one to tell their stories. What is a king without subjects? What is a god without a believer? Zeus turned his gaze to a Titan who had sided with him during the wars, a thinker, a craftsman, a Titan named Prometheus. Zeus called him forward. "The wars are over," Zeus said. "Now let us build. Go down to the earth, Prometheus, mix the clay with water, and create a being in our image." The stage was set for the entrance of the most tragic, resilient, and dangerous creature of all, man. And with man came the beginning of history. The greatest war in human history did not begin with an army, or a dispute over land, or a thirst for gold. It began with a wedding, and it began with a piece of fruit. On Mount Pelion, the gods gathered to celebrate the marriage of the mortal king Peleus to the sea nymph Thetis. It was the event of the century. Every god and goddess was invited. Everyone, except one, Eris, the goddess of discord. The Olympians knew that if Eris came, she would ruin the party with arguments and chaos, so they locked the doors. But Eris, insulted and spiteful, crafted a plan that would burn the world. She arrived at the gates and threw a single golden apple into the banquet hall. Carved into the skin of the fruit was one simple phrase, "To the fairest." The music stopped, the laughter died. 3 goddesses reached for the apple: Hera, the queen of gods, who believed her power made her the fairest. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who believed her intellect made her the fairest. And Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who believed she was beauty itself. They turned to Zeus to decide, but Zeus was wise. He knew that if he chose one, the other two would make his life a living hell. So he abdicated responsibility. He pointed down to the earth, to a shepherd prince grazing his flocks near the city of Troy. "Let him decide," Zeus commanded. "Let Paris of Troy be the judge." Paris was a handsome prince, but he was weak-willed. Suddenly, he found himself standing before three powerful goddesses, each offering him a bribe in exchange for the apple. Hera stepped forward first. "Choose me," she promised, "and I will make you the king of all Europe and Asia. You will have power beyond measure." Athena stepped forward next. "Choose me," she whispered, "and I will give you wisdom and skill in war. You will never lose a battle." Then came Aphrodite. She loosened her robes and smiled. "Choose me," she purred, "and I will give you the most beautiful woman in the world." Paris did not care for politics. He did not care for war. He was a young man driven by lust. Without hesitation, he handed the golden apple to Aphrodite. In that moment, Paris made two powerful enemies, Hera and Athena, who vowed to see his city burn, and he gained a promise that would doom his people. For the most beautiful woman in the world was not free. She was Helen, the queen of Sparta, and she was already married. Paris sailed to Sparta under the guise of diplomacy. King Menelaus of Sparta welcomed him, honoring the sacred laws of Xenia, hospitality. He gave Paris food, shelter, and trust. But while Menelaus was away at a funeral, Paris struck. With the help of Aphrodite, he seduced Helen. They stole the king's gold and fled back to Troy in the dead of night. When Menelaus returned and found his palace empty and his wife gone, his scream was not of sorrow, but of rage. He did not just want his wife back, he wanted blood. He went to his brother, Agamemnon, the high king of Mycenae. Agamemnon was a man who hungered for power. He had wanted to conquer Troy for years, and now his brother's dishonor gave him the perfect excuse. The call went out. The oath of Tyndareus was invoked. Years before, all the kings of Greece had sworn an oath to defend Helen's husband. Now, the debt was due. From every corner of Greece, the heroes gathered. Odysseus, the wily king of Ithaca, who tried to feign madness to avoid the war, knowing it would take him 20 years to return home. Ajax the Great, the mountain of a man who served as the army's shield. And the greatest of them all, Achilles. Achilles was the son of the very couple whose wedding started this mess. His mother, Thetis, knew a prophecy. If Achilles stayed home, he would live a long, peaceful life, but be forgotten. If he went to Troy, he would die young, but his name would live forever. Achilles chose glory. He led his Myrmidons to the ships. 1,186 ships set sail across the Aegean Sea. The destination, Troy. Troy was not an easy target. It was a fortress city, surrounded by massive walls built by Poseidon and Apollo themselves. It was defended by King Priam and his 50 sons, led by the noble Hector. Hector was everything Paris was not. He was a devoted husband, a loving father, and a warrior who fought not for glory, but to protect his family. He knew his brother Paris was wrong to steal Helen, but he would die to defend his brother's life. When the Greek armada landed on the beaches of Troy, the sand turned red. For 9 long years, the war raged. It was a stalemate. The Greeks could not breach the walls of Troy. The Trojans could not drive the Greeks back to the sea. The gods took sides, turning the battlefield into a chessboard. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon supported the Greeks. Aphrodite, Ares, and Apollo supported the Trojans. Zeus sat above, watching the scales of fate tip back and forth. But the real turning point of the war didn't come from a battle. It came from an argument. In the 10th year of the war, Agamemnon, the Greek king, insulted Achilles. He stole a war prize, a girl named Briseis, from Achilles to bruise the hero's pride. Achilles was furious. He felt betrayed by the very king he was fighting for. He drew his sword, ready to kill Agamemnon, but Athena stopped him. So Achilles did something worse than fighting. He quit. He retreated to his tent. "Let the Trojans kill them all," he spat. "I will not lift a finger to save Agamemnon." Without their greatest champion, the Greeks began to crumble. Hector led the Trojan army out of the gates. He smashed through the Greek defenses. He set fire to the ships. The Greeks were on the verge of annihilation. Patroclus, Achilles' beloved companion and cousin, watched the slaughter in horror. He begged Achilles to return. Achilles refused. "Then let me wear your armor," Patroclus pleaded. "Let them think I am you. It will be enough to scare them back." Reluctantly, Achilles agreed. "Drive them from the ships," he warned, "but do not pursue them to the walls." Patroclus donned the divine armor. He led the charge. The Trojans, thinking Achilles had returned, panicked. Patroclus fought like a god, drunk on adrenaline. He forgot the warning. He chased the Trojans all the way to the city gates. There, he met Hector. It was not a fair fight. Apollo intervened, striking Patroclus from behind, knocking his helmet off. Hector stepped forward and drove his spear into Patroclus's belly. The boy fell. The news traveled back to the Greek camp. When Achilles heard that Patroclus was dead, he let out a sound so inhuman that the horses wept. His grief transformed instantly into a cold, white-hot rage. He didn't care about Agamemnon anymore. He didn't care about glory. He wanted Hector. Achilles returned to the battlefield. He did not fight. He butchered. He clogged the river Scamander with so many Trojan corpses that the river god himself rose up to fight him. The Trojan army fled back behind their walls. All except one. Hector stood alone outside the Scaean gates. He knew this was his end. His wife, Andromache, was watching from the tower, tears streaming down her face. Achilles approached, shining like a star of destruction. Fear gripped Hector. He ran. For the first time in his life, the great defender ran. Achilles chased him 3 times around the city walls, like a nightmare that could not be shaken. Finally, Athena tricked Hector into stopping. She appeared as his brother, promising help. Hector turned to face his fate. He threw his spear. It bounced harmlessly off Achilles' shield, the shield forged by Hephaestus. Achilles threw his spear. It pierced Hector's neck. As Hector lay dying, he gasped, "Grant my body to my parents. Let them bury me." Achilles looked down with dead eyes. "There are no pacts between lions and men. I will let the dogs and birds eat you raw." Hector died. And then Achilles did the unforgivable. He tied Hector's ankles to the back of his chariot and dragged the body through the dust, round and round the city of Troy, while Hector's parents and wife screamed from the walls. That night, King Priam of Troy did the unthinkable. He sneaked into the Greek camp. He knelt before the man who killed his son. He kissed the hands that had murdered his children. "Think of your own father," Priam whispered. "I have done what no other man has done. I have kissed the hands of the man who killed my son." Achilles looked at the old king. The rage finally broke. He wept. He returned Hector's body. For a brief moment, amidst the horror of war, there was humanity.
10 years. Both sides were exhausted. The greatest heroes, Hector, Achilles, Ajax, Paris, were dead. Force had failed. Odysseus, the smartest of the Greeks, realized that Troy could not be taken by strength. It had to be taken by guile. He ordered the Greeks to build a massive wooden horse. He hid the elite soldiers inside its hollow belly. The rest of the Greek army burned their camp and sailed their ships behind a nearby island, hiding just out of sight. They left the horse on the beach with a lie, an offering to Athena for a safe journey home. The Trojans came out. They saw the empty beach. They saw the massive statue. They believed the war was over. Despite the warnings of the priest Laocoon, who was strangled by sea serpents, and the princess Cassandra, who was cursed never to be believed, King Priam ordered the horse to be brought into the city. That night, Troy celebrated. They drank until they passed out. The guards fell asleep. In the dead silence of the night, a trap door opened in the belly of the horse. Odysseus and his men descended on ropes. They crept to the gates. They killed the guards. They threw the massive doors open. And the Greek army, which had sailed back under the cover of darkness, flooded in.
It was not a battle. It was a massacre. The Greeks set fire to the city. They slaughtered men in their beds. They threw infants from the walls. They desecrated the temples. King Priam was butchered on the altar of Zeus. Andromache, Hector's wife, was made a slave. Her infant son was thrown from the ramparts. Helen was found by Menelaus. He raised his sword to kill her, to finally take his revenge. But Helen bared her breast and looked at him with tear-filled eyes. Her beauty, the very cause of this hell, saved her once again. Menelaus dropped his sword. He took her back. By morning, Troy was gone. The great city was nothing but ash and smoke. The Greeks had won, but their victory was tainted. In their bloodlust, they had offended the gods. They had destroyed temples and raped priestesses. As the Greek ships set sail home, laden with gold and slaves, the sky turned black. Poseidon and Athena, once their allies, turned against them. They sent a storm that would scatter the fleet across the ocean. Many heroes would never make it home. Agamemnon would return only to be murdered by his wife. And Odysseus, the man who planned the victory, he angered Poseidon most of all. He was destined to wander the seas for 10 more years, facing monsters, witches, and the wrath of the gods, in a journey that would become as famous as the war itself. But that is the story of the Odyssey.